This is a project that's been some time in the making, and I'm really delighted to tell you that it's very much as a result of your input and the needs and interests and values of the region. So our board and the amazing team that have been working on this initiative, we've leveraged funding from the Australian government, and this is a 3-year program that's very much geared towards supporting land managers to apply a holistic model to being productive and sustaining the resource they have for all of its other many values as well. It's been very much based on critical success factors of other programs that we've done that you told us you wanted more of or a variance of. So we've really paid a lot of attention so that we're not just popping up with something and saying opt in because we've got to deliver a program. We asked you, you told us, and we're delighted with what we've come up with, and you'll hear a little bit about that today. It's about building resilience and sustainability of pastoral businesses that can be adaptive and resilient to climate, to market pressures and changes and other drivers of change that leave us sometimes precarious because we didn't do some of that forethought or foreplanning. And of course, it's also going to be about building on the strengths that already exist out there in how you manage your property. So thank you for registering for this session. Thanks for the amazing work that's been done. I'd like to introduce Cherie Gerlach, who's the program manager, the project manager. She's going to take you through the next bit. I'd also like to acknowledge we've got Lucy, excuse me, Lucy and Sarah, who are also key coordinators in the project, and also Paul Wordley, who's our agriculture land care facilitator for the region. So without further ado, have a great session. I hope that you find what you're looking for in this project, and look forward to seeing who's going to be continuing on in the program. I'll say see you and check out, and over to you now, Cherie.
Thanks, Jodie. Hi, everyone. Yeah, we won't take up too much of your time, because I know we're keen to get into the program today. It's going to be a bit of a changing faces for a moment while we introduce you to the project team. So I'll talk a little bit about the Pastoral Sustainability Program, then I'll hand over to Lucy and Sarah, who'll go into much more detail about the specific property management program that you're here to, today to learn more about. And then we'll hand back to Jeanette for the business strategy workshop. So like I said, you'll see a couple of faces pop up, so just bear with us. So the aim of the program really is to support the pastoral industry, so it can remain strong and competitive as we face changes and challenges with climate and market changes. So it's really looking at how we can improve, protect and monitor the land condition, and look at trialling new technologies and tools as well. So there's a big tech component of this, as you'll see in the prospectus. And as I've just mentioned, the prospectus has got a lot of details there. Lucy's pulled up the page that you can see on screen about the property management planning component. Any questions you've got, please ask as we go along today, or if you want to just hold them and then at the end ask questions, or contact any one of us on the project team or your local community engagement officer as well. So today's not your only chance to ask questions. So as you can see in the prospectus, there's a number of different elements to the entire program, the Building Pastoral Sustainability Program. There's training, there's sticky beak days, field days, grants are a big component. But one of the key elements that we'll be talking about today is the property management plan, which is a significant investment by the board in this program. There are limited places just due to the cost of running the program. So we have got 6 places that will be running for this next year, and then we'll have another 6 places for the second intake. And we are working really hard on securing additional funding so we can run a 3rd year of the program. So we'll have at least 12 properties that we'll get through, but we're aiming to at least, run another round. And we'll know more about that in the next few months. So expressions of interest open today. They are open until the 29th of July, and we should make some announcements in mid-August as to who's been successful for the first round. So I'll hand over to Sarah and Lucy, who'll actually step you through each stage of the property management planning process.
So the PNP, we may as well use the term that we'll probably keep talking about it with, is runs in 4 stages, as you might have seen in the prospectus and in the sheet that we've got up on your screen at the moment. Stage 1 is really about your personal business drivers. So this involves a workshop with Jeanette, who's running today's workshop, and we run over 2 half days, and we'll look at sort of long-term business and family visions, understanding values and business culture, strategy and goal setting, succession, how that fits into your strategy, a skills audit, business roles and responsibility, and action planning. So a really good look at your, I guess, your goals for your business. So in today's webinar, we'll begin to look at why these things are important. And if you're excited by this, then we would encourage you to apply for the property management planning program. We really want you to come out of that stage 1 with a strong idea of why you're going into the program. The second stage will be the property mapping, and this is probably what you traditionally know as a property management plan, but this is really only going to be one part of the 4 stages. So the program, the property mapping will begin by bringing together all the existing information that you already have around your property, such as current and historical management and monitoring data and information, any climate data, mapping of the current infrastructure and other spatial data, so your property boundaries, land types, soil types, veg mapping, flora, fauna, weed and introduced species management and mapping. And so this will all be done as a desktop review working with the consultant that will do all the property mapping plans. Then the consultant will come out to your property for 2 to 3 days, depending on the size of your property and what they consider is necessary. And this will be to sit down at the kitchen table and explore your property, I guess, ground truth all the mapping that's been done in the desktop review. So mapping hazards, landscape functions, land uses, any other ecological features, identifying your land types and functions, determining productive potential and degradation risks, identifying production management priorities and potential management practices that have the potential to increase productivity and generate economic returns and improve land condition, and then prioritise those management strategies and into actions. So the final stage of this is pulling together a complete document, so with discussions between you and the consultant, to generate a really comprehensive property management plan. So we want you to come out of this stage with a really strong plan, 10-year minimum plan for your business and property going forward.
I'll just speak to stage 3 and 4. Before I start explaining stage 3, just note that all the financial data is completely confidential. We're in the middle of going through the procurement process to select an independent advisor, and none of your, personal business information will be shared with the board, staff. Yeah, nowhere outside between you and the advisor. So in February, we're looking at we'll run stage 3. So you'll complete a one-on-one consultation with our advisor, whoever that may be. We'll let you know once we select. And they will work with you to create a financial business management report. So this will pretty much just take a deep look into your business in a financial sense and produce a number of financial metric calculations. So things like gross margin, cash flow, return on equity, return on investment, depreciation schedules, the whole show. And then the results of the report will be discussed with you just to make sure that you understand what those calculations actually mean and how they were, calculated. So in March, after you've got your report, so each participant will get a report produced. In March, everybody will come back together to Port Augusta for a workshop with the same advisor, and you'll go through sort of a benchmarking analysis between businesses. So it'll only be high level key performance indicators that are shared. Like, you know, it's not going to be personal information that's compared against each other, just the high level stuff. But it will give you a good insight into how you're performing against other businesses of similar or other similar pastoral businesses. It'll highlight any opportunities or areas for improvement that each business, you know, can work through. The direction of the workshop will be led a little bit by the group. So it'll just depend if there's trends that are identified across a range of businesses, then the advisor will speak to that. So that's a little bit open to, movement by the group. So ideally you'll come out with some key priorities from stage 2 that Sarah mentioned that can be addressed in stage 3. So we want a clear link between all 4 stages. And then stage 4 will be run in April or May, it'll again depend on people's availability, with the same format as stage 1, and that will be run with Jeanette again. So stage 1 will be the opening, stage 4 will be the closing. This workshop will bring all 3 prior stages together and assist you in identifying any opportunities for improvement across the business. So whether it's environmental, financial, you know, just strategy, whatever it might be. The goal of that, you know, the end product of this process is that each business will walk out of that workshop with a clear action plan that will help you, you know, that will give some clear steps to achieve goals that have been identified throughout the process. This will also just include a social dinner and a bit of a wrap up. So that's the crux of the 4 stages, but that's probably enough from us, and we might let Jeanette get into telling you why the strategy and stuff is important.
Thanks, Lucy. I'll just share my screen and get my PowerPoint up. And remember, everybody, to use that chat box. So if your chat box has disappeared, it might now be at the top of your screen if you can't find it at the bottom. But open up your chat box and ask any questions as we go along into the chat box about anything I'm talking about or the program. If we can't pick up on it all now, it's something we can then review and come back to in the first workshop. So I start with a picture of this old house, which was built in 1855, and it's on a property where I currently live. The Longs have had it since 1886. So I'll go to the next slide, and this is what it looks like now. So I guess the reason I share that is that the vision and the strategy to repair this house is not much different to the vision and strategy we have for our farming properties. And it is about intergenerational. Most of our businesses, we do hope that the next generation will continue it mostly, and it's come from the past. So I think there's about 5 generations of William Longs that have lived in this particular home. So let's not think about our businesses short term. Let's really think long term. There's nothing wrong with thinking intergenerationally when we're planning for what we want to do with our businesses into the future. And I think it's even more important these days when we think about the landscape and think about climate change, that we are really thinking in that longer term and then bring it back to what we can do now. So family businesses that we work with have a focus on business and a focus on family, but there's a lot of variety in the way that people approach this. So I've just put together this bit of a model. If we're very focused on family, we're often lifestyle focused, and I come across families where they're very happy, connected families, but they've got no written plans, which is fine if that's where they sit. Very much short-term goals, but they do share them. And often this is a situation where we've got no one coming home. So it's often a business that's got an end point. And that's great. Let's plan the exit and plan it well so that we are not letting it dwindle away over time. Let's recognise where we sit in this framework. The next box is what I call the businesses that are hanging in there. And sometimes I also refer to them as being stuck, and not necessarily from any fault of their own. It could be through tough seasons. It can be through bad succession planning, but the business is often where there's quite a lot of financial strain. There's no plans, they're not shared, and they're not clear. And often financial strain means that we're feeling under stress. We put our heads in the sand and we're not planning because we don't feel clear on where we're going. We're not comfortable. Often what happens in this situation is we end up with a very frustrated family. So not necessarily disconnected or estranged from us, but they're frustrated because they really want to help. They want to help people move forward, but they don't know how to. So there's no clarity in the decision making when we're in the hanging in there mode. The next sort of business I sometimes see is one where I always think of that profit is king. So we're so focused on business that we are not managing our family well. And when I work with most families, businesses, family is really important to them. It's one of their key values. So it's important that we keep in mind that it's a focus on business and family. Our last box we'll go to in a minute. So when we find businesses focused in this box, they often do have plans in place. They're very clear plans, but they're not shared. They're in the manager's head. They're in the leader's head. And maybe bits of them are shared, but they're not shared with everybody. And I often feel that these businesses are driven by control and sometimes by fear. The fear that the next generation isn't going to be able to carry on, the fear that somebody's going to take it away, and very much a control focus. And what happens is the family often get estranged, they're not happy, they disappear, and the leaders often left holding the baby, wondering what have they done wrong. So what's really important is I think that we are in the box where we focus on business and family. To do this really well, we need to be planning for success. To me, it doesn't matter what success looks like. It's success that the family agree that's important. What are we all striving for? What is our long-term vision? Where do we want this business to be intergenerationally, 5 years' time, 10 years' time? This is where a program like Business Manage, the property planning program that's been proposed here is a great opportunity to step out from the doing of your business and as a family stop and think, where are we going? Let's agree on our plans, let's share our goals, and let's write it down. Usually businesses that operate well in this space have formal decision-making structures. The decisions aren't being made by one person. The big decisions are where families sit around the table, have family meetings. Some of the families I work with in this space have farm advisory boards where I'll come in and might be once a year, come in and facilitate a strategic meeting between the family members where everything's on the table. Everyone talks about what's going on, share their goals, share their fears, share what are the challenges within the business. Everyone's across what's going on. The other thing that these families do well is they have family and business boundaries. As we all know, living and working in a pastoral business, a farming business, and I apologise if I use the word farming, a pastoral business, when we live and work in our businesses and we live and work with our families, it can be quite challenging to have those boundaries. So that's something else that's quite important that's on the table, that's worked through, particularly, for the in-laws, for the kids. It's even more important for them that we think about how that all works in the process of running our business. So I highly recommend getting involved in programs like this because it does give you that chance to step outside of your business and really plan for where you're going. So just reflecting on the boxes, think about where do you currently sit, and I acknowledge that it takes time, courage, commitment, and transparency to move into that quadrant of this framework. It's not easy, and it can take quite a lot of time. So we need to step outside and do something at times to make the changes that we need to keep our family in focus and our business in focus. So strategic planning, what is it? We think about strategic planning in terms of the corporate world. They all have their strategic plans, they all do it, but does it apply to us in our pastoral businesses? And I say, yes, it does. It applies to any business. We're multi-million-dollar businesses, so let's take the time to plan. And if we break it down into its simple components, strategic planning is simply saying, where are we now? Where are we going? So what's our long-term vision? And then thinking about how will we get there. So this process gives you the time to do that. So we'll spend a bit of time having a chat about those different points and what are some of the things that we need to do to move between them. I'll just quickly go to this slide. Primary production is a really complex business, as I've already highlighted, and it does involve the family in the business. A lot of what we do is operational. It's the day-to-day stuff that needs to be done, and it's critical to making the success of the business. We also have that little bubble of business management that we've all got better at, I think, since the GST's come in. So we are all better at spending time on our business management than we used to be, because we're reporting regularly to the tax office, which has made us step back and reflect on our finances a lot more than we are. So doing things like the benchmarking that Lucy's talking about is a really good opportunity to have a look at the business, have a look at that side of it and think, where are we going? This program is also about the strategy, which is the small bubble. And I encourage businesses to spend about 4 days a year stepping out and doing the strategy. So develop the plan and review the plan. We have in our business an independent chair. We get together 3 to 4 times a year as a business. Our son works in the business with us, and we spend that time on strategy. So where are we going? What are the challenges we're facing? How's our business culture going? How are we working together as a family? What are the elephants in the room that we need to address? So taking the time out to really focus on that strategy, I find for me, even though I'm a facilitator, works best having somebody else to help me with it rather than trying to do it all by myself. The rest of it works well. The other comment I'll make about this slide is that there's always tension between these little bubbles in our business. And just as an example, yesterday we were trying to spread some urea before the rain, hopefully, that is going to come through today. And we have a truck, an old Freightliner, that's been put off the road several times. So trying to collect fertilizer is becoming a challenge. So my husband, Bill, is busy trying to think about the strategy and the machinery replacement schedule while he's out in the paddock spreading urea, and my son's driving the spray unit, getting, the paddock sprayed, the weed sprayed before the rain. So there's lots of operational stuff going on, and my son tends to run the operation side of the business. I tend to be more the business management, and Bill tends to do the strategy. And at times operation takes over everything, and yesterday was a classic example of that. We're busy trying to get everything done before hopefully it rains in the next 24 hours. But there's big strategic decisions about machinery replacement that also are pressing and need to be made, and that end of financial year stuff that needs to be, those last minute things that need to be done. So we've got tension and pull between the parts of the business that people look after, which cause stress in the family business. Really important that we recognise those tensions and stresses, and that we allow and allocate time for those 2 smaller bubbles. It's very easy to get caught up in the big operations bubble and not spend time in those other bubbles. So just reflect on where you're spending most of your time. Successful businesses pull themselves out and make sure those 2 bubbles happen well as well. I guess I often say to people, recognise that work happens in the office too. We often think the only time we're working is when we're outside doing stuff. Work is also happening when we're inside. So it is a family business. What does success look like for all of you, not just for some of you? First thing I always do when I'm working with families is to really focus in on the goals. So not just business goals, but personal goals. So clarify the motivations. What is it that we value about this business? What is it that we value about what we're doing? The why. The why are we here? What is the purpose? And then think about the personal goals for each of the people in the business, and what the business needs to be providing for them to keep their happiness up and their level of inspiration and motivation up. Then think about the business goals. Where do we want the business to be in 5 years, 10 years, and then really long term? Think about that intergenerational stuff. Is that part of where we're headed with our business? Put it on the table, talk about it. And also clarifying what people's role will be in the business in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. So stop and think, where would you like to be? Because if we want to be in that quadrant that we talked about in the first slide, in the focus on business and focus on personal, we really need to share all of those things and what our aspirations are. It comes down to that, talking about transition and the importance of transition in family businesses. If we want to be intergenerational, it needs to be planned for. So this stuff needs to be shared with the whole family, not just the people involved in the business, but everybody, if we want the business to be intergenerational and continue on. I'll just mention succession planning for a minute, because it's always something that crops up in discussion. I don't like to use the word succession planning anymore, because to me, succession planning implies that it's an event. It's a point in time that me as the business owner hands over to my son. In agriculture, it's not like that. We don't tend to retire, leave and walk out. And we don't have a point in time usually when someone takes over. It's a gradual process. So when I reflect on my own journey, my father-in-law died in 2016. In 2015, he moved out of that house that I showed you at the beginning, and Bill and I moved into the family business. We have been working in the family business since 1995. We went away and worked. We came back about the time I was 30 and have been involved in that business ever since. My son came home in 2015 after doing some study and traveling around. He came back to the business in 2015. So transition started in 1995 when I came home, finished from one generation in 2015 and started again with the next generation in 2015. My responsibility, I see, to my son coming home is that in 10 years' time, we have built him up to have the skills to be a business manager, to be able to make this business be intergenerational and successful in the future. So it would be irresponsible of me to think that in a point in time we can walk out and leave him without making sure he's got the skills to be able to take it further. So that whole thing about family is so entwined in our business and our vision for the future. So yes, a business is about profit and it's important. Yes, and it's also important about all of those other things that make life enjoyable and fun for everybody, so that they want to continue to be part of that farming business and have that legacy for the future. So thinking about what is the legacy, what are we building? And these are pictures of the house in the middle of renovation. My husband and son both fly aeroplanes and both love fishing. So that's some of the things that they are passionate about. We often say for Bill, it's the farming, fishing and flying that motivates him to keep going and to keep it all together and keep moving forward. So what is it that drives us? What is it that motivates us, so that we share the goals and share our aspirations as we go through? All right, I'm going to stop there for a minute before I move on to see if anyone's got any questions, comments or thoughts they would like to throw into the mix. Lucy, anything from you?
No, I was trying to rack my brain for questions, just anticipating the pause. But no, like, to be fair, you're fairly comprehensive. Nothing I can really think of to draw more info out of you, to be honest.
Thanks, Lucy. If anyone wants to add anything to the chat, please add any thoughts or comments to the chat box as we go along. Right, back to our strategic planning. So step one is to really think about where you are now. So it's important I always think it's important to reflect on the business history. How has this business come from where it started to where it is now, and jot some thoughts down. It's great to have to pass on, and it's also really useful to think about. So I think I put in an email message to my husband just yesterday that our journey through agriculture has mountains, craters, and bumps along the road, and lots of twists and turns, and we can learn a lot from the ups, the downs, the craters in the road. So reflecting on where we've come from and helps us to think about where we're going. So it's worth putting that bit of time in. Think about the now. Think about the situational analysis. What's going on right now? So the strengths, the weaknesses, threats and opportunities to our businesses. Strengths and weaknesses are our internal things. Let's grab a mouthful of water. So what are the things that are working well? What do we bring to this business that gives it strength? What are the threats? And what are the opportunities? They are usually outside the business. Some of things we don't have control over. So for example, China at the moment, and some of the things that are going on in China with wool prices, with barley, with beef, a lot of that's pretty much outside of our control, but it's certainly something that we need to have on our radar and be aware of when we're planning for how we're going to run our businesses. And then thinking about what are the opportunities. So where can we duck and weave, or where can we change things in our business to create new opportunities, bring new strengths, new skills into our business that can enhance it for the future. So really drill down on those things. Think hard about what they are within your business. So that's one of the things that we will do as part of the business planning and developing your vision. Spend a bit of time on that. And some of you may already do that and do it often, but it's certainly something to go back to and reflect on a regular basis. Do your benchmarks, which is also part of this program, and think about your business structures. Are they the business structures that are supporting you to where you want to go in the future, or do they need to be tweaked or changed as you go along? So really think about the where you are now.
Jeanette?
Yep.
We've just had a question come in the chat box from Paul. He's just asked, would you recommend employing an independent person to assist with some of these discussions? Yes,
Paul, I always recommend that it's best to, we run multi-generational businesses and people balk at paying often for this sort of help, but I think it's invaluable. As I said already, I do this work with farm families, but we pay someone to help us with it. I believe that you need to have someone help you work through it so you can be completely involved in your business and the process and what you're doing, rather than the process that you're going through, if that makes sense. So plus an independent facilitator will ask the questions about the elephants in the room that we all avoid. Now, there mightn't be big elephants, but we all have them in family businesses that need to be addressed. In our business, we've got this code that they say to me, take your mum hat off or take your wife hat off, because let's sit at the board table, be equals and have a conversation. And as a mother, it's very easy to slip, or wife, it's very easy to slip back into trying to be the smooth oil that keeps the wheels turning, which isn't helpful at the board table, or when we're making the strategic decisions. So highly recommend getting somebody in to give you a hand with this stuff. I think I've already talked about this with the long-term visions and goals, but really stretch it out. 5 years, 10 years, long-term hopes and dreams. So if you're part of the program, this is some of the pre-work that I'll be encouraging you to do, to bring along, to all write these things down individually and then share them collectively, so that you're really pulling together a long-term vision or goal that works for all of you in your business. Just share very quickly a story. A family I work with in Victoria, with two older brothers who have continued to work together for all of their farming career, and they both have 2 children each, but only one of those children wants to come home into the business. So we got the whole family together and worked out a long-term vision for the business. That means that that business is going to stay together. Often what we see is that businesses split. So you'll have 2 brothers that work really well together for many, many years. And when the next generation come along, they say, well, cousins can't work together. I disagree with that. But what I would say is that this stuff becomes even more paramount when you've got cousins working together. That family have worked out their long-term vision and goals. One of the family members has come home and is now running that business for his cousins. So they have put him in as the CEO. They're looking at running it like a family corporate instead of a family business. And it is so far extremely successful. I've been really impressed with the thinking of this next generation about exit clauses and culture and values and what's important to them, and how, and the transparency of the financial reporting, so everybody knows what's going on. It's really aspirational to see this generation being really clear that they want this business to grow and develop for all of their benefit, but recognizing that somebody needs to run it and how that will happen. So I think we need to look outside and think how we can make it work. What's working elsewhere within other industries and also within other family businesses like Cooper's or Haig's Chocolates, or, you know, let's think, how do some of these other businesses run? How do they make it work? And what are some of the learnings we can take from that? Values are really important. Agreeing on the core values that are going to be important to your business, and because values define behaviours. So it's not just coming up with the words and saying we value family, but what does it mean in your business? An example of this is, if you ask me, I'd say it means I need to be there for my children, assisting my children. You ask my husband, and the first thing that will pop into his head is it means I must provide for them. All right, so we have different meanings, even though we have the same word, and it defines different behaviours. So it means my career choices up until my children grew up was very much about how I could be at home for them. And for him, providing for them meant he worked hard. So, you know, actually they end up being conflicting, even though it's the same core value. This is really important, that we actually spend the time to design the culture. So how do we, and when I talk about culture, I mean, what's it like to work around here? So if somebody new turns up on your property, and they're not going to ask you what it's like to work around here, they're going to ask somebody else that works in your business, what's it like to work around here? And understanding that gives you the clue into what the culture is like. So define and design your culture and check in to make sure you're walking the talk of your culture. It's not always easy. And this is something else that we sit around the board table and talk about. And I also work with 3 corporate farms, which one of them has is an Australian super fund money. And we spend quite a lot of time on this because culture is really important to them to attract and retain staff. So they spend time with their staff, really understanding the culture and really working hard on how they can make it the way they want it to be. I think this is something we really need to think hard about in agriculture, because we have trouble getting people, or having trouble getting and retaining the people that we want within our businesses. So think about the culture, design the culture, and work hard at it is something that's also part of a strategic plan. The how will we get there? Let's brainstorm, let's be innovative. There's no such thing as a dumb idea. Think outside the box. Put all ideas on the table. In our family business, we were not only running the property in the mid-north, we had a farming property on York Peninsula, which is my family property where I grew up. When our son decided to come home, I'm sure many of you have heard land prices on York Peninsula are ridiculous. So to buy land on York Peninsula now is about $7,500 an acre. So we decided, we thought outside the box. We made a strategic decision to sell the farm on Yorke Peninsula. Lots of people say, oh, how could you do that? Well, we couldn't afford to expand. We were stuck within that, within that high land price, high lease price, a business that wasn't big enough for our son to be involved in. So we sold that 2,000 acres, went to Eyre Peninsula, bought some more land, and are now farming 8,500 acres of cropping on Eyre Peninsula. Yes, we've taken a lot of risk. Yes, we've had 3 tough seasons, and yes, it's not over yet, but we have a view, we have a vision. We're hoping that we'll get there. And we could do it because the boys flew, so they can fly back and forth between the properties. So, don't throw out the ideas that you think are a bit out there. Acknowledge them, put them on the table, ruminate on them, and think about them. I must admit, when the first time Bill came home and told me that, I wasn't in favour because it was my family property. But long term, hopefully I can say it was the right thing. So think about all those ideas, put them on the table. Set your high level objectives. And here's a few ideas of some of the headings they might come under in your plan. Things like cost-effective productivity, business growth, generational transition. And I encourage everybody that's an intergenerational business to have that as one of the pillars of your strategic plan. It could be safety, innovation, logistics, people and culture, another really important one that often gets overlooked. And the environmental landscape, the environmental management within your business. So those are some ideas of some of the headings that you might start to develop some objectives and strategy underneath. Not limited to that. That's just some thinking of some of the headings that other people have used within their businesses. And I'll leave this one as the last slide. Here we'll be able to delve more into this when we get into those workshops. But the last thing is really thinking about the action plans. This is the doing stuff. This is where we get to tick stuff off, the what, the who, and the when. And how will we know we've achieved it? It's really important to make this bite-sized bits. We can't eat that elephant in one bite. We have to break it into small chunks. I really love using Post-it notes. I think Post-it notes are a great way of doing planning. You can put them up behind the office door, you can move them around, you can theme them up. They're a great way of doing visions. They're a great way of collecting strategies and thinking out your ideas. You can put one idea per Post-it note and then sort them out. Same thing with doing the action plan. Good way of doing it. The what, the who, the when, put them up there. And I did a workshop with a group of women on Kangaroo Island last week who were recovering from fire. And one of them had told a story how she'd gone and got a whiteboard, 2 or 3 whiteboards actually, and had put them all the way down the hallway in their house and had put all the action plan up for the recovery from fire. She'd broken it up into little steps. She'd put it all up on these whiteboards all the way down the hall. And the key point was she wasn't rubbing them off the whiteboard. She was going on with a big red pen and doing a big tick next to them as she achieved each one of those, or someone in the business achieved each one of those small goals towards that recovery from fire, so that every day it was a reminder to them that they were making small steps towards their long-term vision and goals about getting that property back fenced, sheep back on it, and back into the future of where they were going. So I guess my leading thought is back to where I started. Don't let the future just happen to you. It's about creating your ideal future.